Hello, nerds! Thank you for watching Generally Nerdy. This is your Week in Nerdom for April 2nd, 2019. Week in Nerdom is your bi-weekly show to get all of the nerd news headlines in all of the categories across the nerddom. And this week is a pretty balanced, actually. It's quite balanced across all of the topics. So let's jump into the intro real quick. First thing is music, as is per usual. And in music, we have news from the Rolling Stones. As I don't know if I've talked about it here on Generally Nerdy, but I definitely talked about it over on the Podzine. I am anticipating going to New Orleans for Jazz Fest this year, and one of the big acts that was kind of a surprise was the Rolling Stones. They are supposed to have been going to Jazz Fest, but recently Mick Jagger has an undisclosed illness, and they have had to postpone the rest of the tour dates on their tour. Again, it's an undisclosed illness, but it must be pretty significant if they've postponed everything for the remainder of their tour, which includes Jazz Fest. As more of this becomes known, we'll definitely be talking about it because the Stones have kind of been around forever, so it's really potentially this could not be great, but we're not going to dwell on that. We're going to move on down the line to Killswitch Engage, and in a recent interview on their current tour, Mike D, the bass player for Killswitch Engage, was talking about their process and was talking about recording the new album. And in that process of recording, they apparently went to Jesse because the way Killswitch does it is they do music first and then pass everything to Jesse to write lyrics. They don't write everything all at once like some bands do. So when they went to Jesse, their vocalist, with the music, they had tracks. They had approximately 22, I think he said somewhere in the neighborhood of 22 to 25 instrumental tracks that Jesse had the option for laying down lyrics. And when he decided which tracks to choose from, he chose about 17 tracks to do lyrics for. So they effectively have 17 new songs for this new record. Now, they're not likely to put out that many songs on the record, but they do have plans to use the remainder once the record does come out. And then the last bit from music this week is Lamb of God is old. Their third record, Ashes of the Wake, is turning 15 this year. That's right. Ashes has been out for 15 years. And to commemorate the 15-year anniversary, they're re-releasing the record. It sounds like it might be a vinyl exclusive, though don't hold me to that because they never explicitly said that in any of the bits that I read. But the only track listing that I could find is for a vinyl. The vinyl is going to be 4 records, but the original release is 3 records. The 4th record is 4 tracks that weren't originally on the release. One of those tracks is called Another Nail for Your Coffin, and then the other 3 are just demo versions of songs that already were on the album. This is pretty awesome. Any new Lamb of God, even if it's technically old Lamb of God you've just never heard before, is definitely worth a listen. In TV news this week, we've got some interesting developments going on. First, just to get it out of the way real quick, Umbrella Academy, one of the best comic book adaptation, live action comic book adaptations in the last decade or more, has officially been announced to be getting a season 2, so that's pretty awesome. But then the interesting bits come from WonderCon Anaheim, and the powers that be at DC held a panel at WonderCon, and in this panel, they discussed some things that we will talk about in the comic books section. If you are listening to this on the Big Show Entertainment Network, you're going to have to join me on my YouTube channel, Generally Nerdy, in order to get the comic book news from DC. But there is television news that's coming out of this panel as well. And that television news is pretty significant. First, we got the announcement of the release date for Swamp Thing on the DC Universe app, and that is May 31st, so we are just a few weeks away from that. We also got July 2nd as the official return of the Young Justice series. Then, slightly more foggy on the details with the Titans Season 2 is going to be sometime early fall, and then the Harley Quinn animated series is going to be late fall. We also got the official announcement that the sci-fi series, Krypton, will be going over to the DC Universe app as well, and the first season will find its way onto the app as of April 5th, with the Justice League versus the Fatal Five finding its way onto the app as of April 16th, though the release for Justice League versus the Fatal Five was a little unclear if it was only going to be released through the app or if there's going to be a physical release as well on the same day. Moving over next into movie news, we've got a couple of bits for movie news, literally a couple. There's only two. It was kind of a slow weekend, so hopefully the rest of this week we'll see a lot more news develop. However, all we have right now starts with The Dead Won't Die. We talked about this in the last episode, and now we have a trailer, and the trailer shows you more of that amazing cast that I talked about in the last episode, so go check that out. And then also coming out of WonderCon is the official announcement for Mark Hamill, who will be doing the voice for Chucky in the Child's Play remake that is coming out later this year. Now, this is not to be confused with the killer stuck in a toy body series that is going to be continuing the original line of movies. They just can't use Child's Play for those. They're going to only be able to use the Chucky name. We do know now that the doll is still going to be called Chucky for the reboot series as well. Bonus headlines this episode, because it was a slower weekend. We're going into gaming next. The first piece we have is about Valve's new VR headset. Now, very little is actually known about this headset, but if you go over to Valve's website, there is a placeholder for the Valve Index, is what they're calling it. And there's no mention of HTC anywhere on the page, which might imply that Valve is going solo this time for the VR headset. No specs have been released just yet. It will be interesting to see what they have in store, as this is the first generation shift in modern VR technology. And then we have a rather exciting update from Software. That's a little confusing. The name of the company is From Software. They are the developer that brought us Dark Souls and the new Sekiro. I know I'm not pronouncing that right. The Shadows game. They are apparently teaming up with George R.R. Martin to produce a new game that Martin, his role has been a little less than clear, though he is likely a creative consultant or a writer of some sort on the project, but he is going to be involved in a game from the people who gave us Dark Souls. If that doesn't make you excited, you're not playing games right. Apparently in the game, it is going to be based around a series of kingdoms that you are supposed to conquer. And as you conquer those kingdoms in whichever order you decide, it is not a set story in that respect. So whichever kingdom you decide to conquer, you get a special ability, which is going to be an interesting angle on the RPG gameplay. Now, let's talk about comic books real quick. And like I said, pretty balanced, about 2 or 3 pieces for each section, and comic books is no different. We have 3 pieces of news for comic books this week. First is the Hall of Fame. This year's San Diego Comic-Con is going to introduce a comic book character Hall of Fame. And the first inductee, very interestingly, is going to be Batman. Batman might not be the most recognized comic book character, especially with the success of the MCU in theaters. However, he is one of the oldest and most treasured comic book characters, so it kind of makes sense, though it probably would have made slightly more sense for them to go with Superman. Either way, Batman is going to be the first inductee into the Comic Book Character Hall of Fame. It's actually great timing because of his 80th birthday, which actually, now that I think about it, is very likely the reason why they chose Batman and not Superman. Next up is the DC Universe update that I alluded to in the TV section. This side of the DC panel is kind of what we've been waiting for a long time, because DC, actually ever since the DC Universe app was announced, and the extent to which the app was going to give us content. This is the update that comic book readers have been waiting for, and if you're looking to get into reading comic books, this might be a fantastic way to do it. The DC Universe app is going to have every comic book that DC has ever published. That's right, every comic book, except for things that came out within the last 12 months, much like the Marvel Now app. Only Marvel's version of this is 6 months. If it has come out in the last 6 months, it is not on the Marvel Now app. So for DC, if it has come out in the last 12 months, it will not find its way onto the DC Universe app until it is at least 12 months old. And then our last bit of news for this episode, guys, comes from Marvel, and they're talking about Major X. Remember, this is the new Rob Liefeld creation. Liefeld, if you don't know, is the guy who gave us Deadpool, started writing Deadpool and created the character and then abandoned him, and then Joe Kelly, who we interviewed last year at Dink. That guy. So Liefeld created Major X. We've gone into the brief synopsis that we know about the character so far. Well, it seems that the #1 issue, according to Marvel, has sold out. And the first run, at least, of the first issue has sold out. So when they do a second printing, there is going to be a different cover for the second printing. The first printing will be the picture you've already seen. The second printing will be the one on your screen now, which shows us Major X without his helmet. Now, this is an interesting one because comic book publishers, and very notoriously Marvel among them, don't really just send out just what's ordered by comic book shops. They send out approximately, very much depending on the title, but they usually send out approximately somewhere between 5 and 10 extra copies versus what was ordered. So I don't know how much I believe that this is a, quote, sold out comic book. However, it is very interesting to think that this is that popular considering Marvel's recent history with very low sales. Now, this is a new #1, which Marvel does all the time, so maybe that has a major, likely that has a major factor into this. We will only see come issue 2 and 3 how much of a staying power this has on the new title. And that is the end of your week in Nerddom, guys. What did I miss? What should I cover at the end of the week? Let me know in the comments down low. If, though, you want to go deeper into the conversation, then you can jump over to the website, generallynerdy.net. You can find all of the freebies and all of the links to everything else up on the website, or most of those links are also down in the description. One of those links takes you to the Patreon, patreon.com/generallynerdy. If you want to go a little bit deeper, help support the channel a little more, patreon.com/generallynerdy is the place to do that, so go check that out. 5 levels, you know how Patreon works at this point. If this is your first time on the channel, then don't forget to click the subscribe button and ring the bell so you get the update every time I upload these videos, plus any of my streaming videos, any reviews. I'm about to start on con season, so we will be covering Comic-Cons across Colorado and Utah and maybe more. Actually, the maybe more is probably not going to happen until next year, but still, it will happen eventually. If you liked the video, click the thumbs up. If you didn't like the video, there's a thumbs down too. That's Perfectly fine. Or if you're falling behind on your nerd news and you want to catch up, then you can click or tap that box right there to the left of my face to do that. But before we click on boxes and visit websites and do all of the things, guys, always remember that if it's generally nerdy, it's probably here.